it's very different being a performer of a creative work as opposed to actually creating the work. And that's not put down of actors. And I'm glad I had that experience. And in some ways now, I think it would probably be helpful for me to take acting classes just to put myself in the shoes of actors.
Yeah.
What I make them do.
What your expectations are that are going to happen.
Yeah, no, exactly what I put them through. And I have been reading. And of course I've worked with a lot of actors and some really great ones too. Yeah, the process of the development process, and there's no one set way. It differs from show to show. But when it works well, what's exciting is when good actors will elevate your material.
Oh, okay.
And you often learn, with great actors, you actually learn there are things you don't need to be said because they can act it. It doesn't have to be written out.
Oh, interesting. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Living in the Limelight. I'm your host, Jay Huller. As a quick reminder, please follow us on Instagram at Living in the Limelight Show and check out our website at livinginthelimelight.com. And of course, you can find our podcasts through all the major streaming services, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Check us out also on YouTube at Living in the Limelight Podcast. Each week, we feature a conversation with a different artist where we delve into what makes them tick, and sometimes we get pro tips on pursuing a career as an artist. If you are a performer or know someone who is and would like to be considered for our show, check out the questionnaire at livinginthelimelight.com, and thanks so much for listening. Randall David Cook is a New York-based playwright who originally hails from South Carolina. To date, he's produced 2 shows off-Broadway, namely Saki with the Haiku Geisha and Fate's Imagination, both with nice reviews from the New York Times. He's created an array of plays, dance musicals, and so much more, really with too many accolades to even count. Join us as we discuss the art of writing, the process of taking a play into production, and fascinating tidbits in between. Let's welcome Randall David Cook to Living in the Limelight.
Hello?
Hello, is this Randall?
Hi, Jay. This is Randall. How are you?
Oh, I am great. I'm so glad to be able to talk to you. And I was just thinking about this. You are the first playwright, one, that I've ever talked to at length, because I know this is going to be a great conversation, and 2, to be on this show, this platform. And I love how we're kind of flipping the tables here, because he's usually focused on the people on that stage, but you're driving that. So I want to thank you right up front for just taking the time to have this conversation.
Absolutely, and thank you for having me.
Of course. I always like to start way back, because I think, science says that we are from what we came from. And I'd love to know where the writing bug came for you, and how it just sort of like pushed at you and brought you to where you are, because you're writing these great pieces and putting actors on stages and just entertaining all these people. And it had to come from somewhere. Where did you first kind of think, well, you know what, this might be for me?
Great question, and complicated, right? The origins of these things.
Yeah.
It's the theater. I've always been a strong writer, if you will. I mean, rather than teachers told me I was a good writer, right? So,
right.
And when teachers tell you you're good at something, you tend to often sort of develop that and follow that.
Sure.
I remember starting getting that kind of feedback even as early as 6th grade. And then even when in college, like even English comp, which I was hilarious. I was afraid to take the basic English class at college, and because I heard it was a real heartbreaker for a lot of grades for a lot of people. But I did well. I made an A in that class, and then I was
No, you're absolutely right. That thought is out there. And I had the same thing when I was in that freshman English class. It's like, oh, it's going to kill me.
Yes. No, I totally, I mean, I waited until I was a sophomore to take it, which is ridiculous. But, and I ended up writing a lot for, the student newspaper and then became editor. But, so I was doing all that, but then junior year of college, the theater on campus, but I was always interested in, before I even I'm going to jump back for a second.
Sure.
My sophomore year of high school, someone next to me in class, in biology class, turned to me and said, they're showing this thing on Great Performances on Friday night, called Sweeney Todd. Oh. You should watch it. And for some reason, this was back in the day of VCR.
Sure.
I taped it while I was watching it. And Sweeney Todd, of course, is the Stephen Sondheim, Hugh Wheeler musical, and that blew my mind.
Well, what do you think about it? Like, blew your mind? What was it that was so captivating? Because when I talk to musicians, for example, it's music that their parents play for them, or church, or it's something. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I had been raised with music my whole life because my mom was a choir director and a piano teacher, and so there was always music in the house. She taught piano at home, so the background of my upbringing was always music. Mind you, it wasn't always beautiful music. You have a lot of beginner students making mistakes, and you're hearing the same thing over and over again. But so I was raised with, and I was also raised Lutheran.
Okay.
Come from a long line of Lutheran ministers, and so if you're raised Lutheran, you hear a lot of J.S. Bach.
Oh, yes, right.
So I had a lot of Bach in my background, and also just a lot of music, period. And then what happened when I was sophomore year of high school, when I saw this production of Sweeney Todd on television. There's an irony of that, actually. But prior to that, theater to me only was like Sound of Music and The Music Man. These great age musicals, golden age musicals, I should say, that I liked very much. But suddenly I'm watching this musical with an amazing score, but at the start of Act 2, it's a blend of ballad, and while they're singing this beautiful love ballad, and different characters are different places on the stage, and all the stories happening simultaneously, this barber is cutting people's throats on stage, and those bodies are being turned into pies that are being eaten. And I thought, wait a minute, what is this? Theater isn't just Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals. Is it Hammerstein or Hammerstein? I always get that confused.
I'll put that in your hands because it's
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know. But so that actually opened the door. And actually, I've learned over time that Sweeney Todd production of On Great Performances was a gateway for many people who work in theater now. I mean, it is that incredible. And the staging. So suddenly my imagination was wrapped. I was like, what is this? And that got me investigating, okay, what is theater? Is not just what I thought it was. It's much more than that. And what do I not know? And the bug bit me, and it never quite let go.
Yeah, apparently not.
No, it really didn't. So even when I was not, I didn't study theater in college, but I was really interested from that point forward, and I would go and I would just check out plays from the library, and I was a voracious reader. And of course, when you've had a little exposure, there's a lot to read. And I continued that. And then junior year of college, I'm going back to where this almost started. A production of the theater department was doing a production of All's Well That Ends Well, the Shakespeare play, one of his problem plays. And as a large male cast, there are 5 female roles, but mostly males, and not enough guys auditioned. I don't know where all the regulars were. Maybe they didn't want to do the problem play.
Yeah.
In any case, they did a second round of auditions, and a friend said, you should try out. And I did on a whim, and I'm sure it was a terrible, terrible audition. but they needed everyone, every bloke they could find, and so I was cast. And that experience, being in a play, it's quite priceless, by the way. To start with Shakespeare, I don't recommend that for the budding actors out there. But doing I love the vibe. I love the camaraderie, and that never left me. So in college at that point, I was involved in the theater and, doing a lot of writing. But the two did not, so it all started with that. And then I just kept, but I put it aside for many years. I kept telling myself I wasn't going to do that. Also, my plan was to work on the business side of theater.
Okay.
I majored in business in college, and then got an international MBA, and had worked overseas in Japan and France. And then, and when I moved to New York City, I planned to work on the business side of theater. I was interested in that too. Had I met with the right people, a lot of people I now know, that might have been what happened.
Interesting.
I might be doing that, but I met terrible people. It was awful, and then I just started going. But I was here in New York. I'd always wanted to live here because I wanted to see theater on a regular basis, and I was going and going, and I started complaining to some of my friends. Well, I'm not that impressed with what I'm seeing. And then one of them finally said to me, "Well, if you think you can do better, you do it.
Yeah,
you sit down.
The challenge has been set."
Yeah, because it's very easy. It's very easy to criticize. So I sat down and wrote that first play. It took a year, and I'm sure if I looked at the first draft now, I'd probably shriek in horror. But I didn't know. I never had a writing class. I never had a theater class. So I'd seen a lot and I'd read a lot. Yeah.
So you just kind of you were driven from that, and you just almost like a cold turkey sense. You just said, "Okay, I'm going to do this," and you didn't know maybe the formatting of the way the script is supposed, or the documents.
Oh no! I had to totally reformat once I did it. A draft once said, "By the way, this is not how this is done." And also, but in some ways, the ignorance was sort of blissful, right?
Yeah.
It was pure, just a pure stream of imagination, and I had so much fun with it because I didn't know what I did not know. And yeah, but then insanely, I showed it to a few friends, and then someone handed it to someone else because I knew no one in the business at all at this point. And they said, "Let's do a reading of the play." And I said, "What's a reading?"
Yeah.
I didn't know. And then we had it, and then someone at that reading handed it somewhere else, and then that play ended up being produced. My very first play ended up being produced.
Wow.
And I had some readings at some prestigious spots as well on the way. So yeah, I was totally thrown into the industry from the very first play. And I don't recommend playwrights having their first play produced for lots of reasons.
Feel free to share those. Any that come to mind.
My gosh! Again, you don't know. I guess you always have to have that first production, right? So I guess for most people, they wouldn't have done it so cold turkey. They would have taken some drama classes, maybe been involved in it.
Yeah.
But me and not having that, literally being tossed into the ocean and swim or drown. And yeah. Wow. So that's, it was a circuitous path for me and not direct.
And so during that process, what is it? You mentioned the vibe of being on stage, and I get that. I auditioned for one thing one time, and just the audition itself was so riveting. And, so I could sort of maybe get the glimpse of what that's like. And I've talked to actors before, but do you have, what are the emotions that run through you? And you can talk to that first piece that you did, or maybe currently when your work, your art is going from hand to hand, it's being read at a table, it's being judged before it's even on stage, before the costumes, before all of it, the virginal stage of it, in its process. What is that like for you? Is it filled with just a range of emotions? Or how do you feel?
Yes, typically it is. I mean, the performing aspect is so different. It's very different being a performer of a creative work as opposed to actually creating the work. And that's not put down of actors. And I'm glad I had that experience. And in some ways now, I think it would probably be helpful for me to take acting classes just to put myself in the shoes of actors.
Yeah.
What I make them do.
What your expectations are that are going to happen.
Yeah, I know exactly what I put them through. And I have been reading, and of course I've worked with a lot of actors and some really great ones too. But the process of, the development process, there's no one set way. It differs from show to show. But when it works well, what's exciting is, when good actors will elevate your material.
Oh, okay.
And you often learn, with great actors, you actually learn there are things you don't need to be said because they can act it. It doesn't have to be written out.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I was doing a big reading with for a play called In a Town Near Faith with actress Barbara Barrie, who was an Oscar nominee in '79 for Breaking Away. She lost to Meryl Streep, as many people do lose to Meryl Streep.
Yes.
but she'd won Cannes. She was an Emmy nominee and a Tony nominee. Like she's been in the business forever, and she knows. She's a great. So we had this this was an all day thing. So we rehearsed all day and with a reading performance for the public that night.
Oh, wow.
And in the middle of the afternoon, she asked to speak to me privately, and I sat down next to her, and she says, I don't, and mind you, this is, by far among the cast, this is the actor with the most accolades, right? I am working with an Oscar, Emmy, and, Tony nominated actor. And she's done it all.
And so what she's about to share with you should be paid attention to.
Well, exactly. Not only that, but also you'd be insane not to listen, right? But then but this is how true to the art she is. She told me, I don't need all these words. She was basically telling, let's cut my dialogue as much as we can.
Interesting.
Now, yes, it takes a very secure actor and an actor very true to the work as a whole to ask for that. And so we sat down right then and there, and I cut.
And did she explain to you, or are you just taking her on faith, or did she kind of give you a glimpse of, well, like, for example, did she on the spot show you how fewer words could still be portrayed through acting, or you just kind of like, okay, well, she knows her stuff, I'm going to do this, and then you saw the result of the conversation after?
Actually, both things. We did it line by line. We did it line by line in private. Like, what does she need? And so I'm not sure. I don't remember. I can't imagine she would have acted that for me, but we would talk about it.
Okay.
And everything was logical. If it had been illogical to me, I wouldn't have cut it.
Gotcha.
And then boom, boom, boom. And then I got to see it performed that evening, which was a great turnaround.
Okay.
And I'm like, wow, yeah, she's absolutely right. And actually, the truth is, Jay, almost everything can be shorter, right? I mean, rarely does an audience complain about something being too short.
True, but and pardon my, I'm a novice at this, but to me, in my mind, it almost has to start on the paper in long form, just to have the thoughts out there. One, for any novice actors who don't know how to do what she just did for you, and two, if there are fewer words, what if the actors portraying that go in a totally different direction that maybe words that had been there or should have been there weren't. So I don't know. I'm a more is better in the beginning, and then if it gets cut. And did you get were your feelings hurt at all when like she's like, oh, let's strike all this, or was it just all professional?
No, not at all. She had worked with me like that year. That producer who was sort of guiding that project had basically set up. He was working for Disney at the time, so we would rehearse at the at the Amsterdam Theater on 42nd Street. Oh, wow. Because above where Aladdin was showing, because at the very top, Ziegfeld, that's where the Disney offices are. Oh. And Ziegfeld used to have his offices up there. So I want to say for every 2 months of that year, this producer was really itching for me to get this play done. So he arranged for these actors to get together with me every 2 months, 2 or 3 months, for me to keep me on deadline and keep me, writing pages. So, and then some actors would come and go if they weren't quite right. But Barbara Barrie, this acclaimed actress, signed up. She loved it. She wanted to do it. So she'd been working with me for a full year, or at least for a big chunk of change. I thought, I can't believe I'm getting an actor of her caliber to come in and literally just read pages. So no, my thing is absolutely we're not hurt. It's all I don't get hurt. For me, always in the rehearsal room, in tech rehearsal, actually pretty much from anybody, if the best idea wins.
Okay.
Because when all said and done, it's about the work. I'm also not the one on stage. Thank goodness. Thank goodness for everybody.
Right. So if the best idea is what drives into the final result, there you
always,
go. Okay.
Always. And I try to have very little ego about that because, and one thing I love about collaboration is, and why I don't direct my own pieces, especially the first or second production of any piece, is I want that other person. I want their thoughts. I want their creativity. I want that collaboration. We can come up with more together than I can by myself.
Yeah, I've learned that. I've talked to a lot of Nashville musicians, and it shocks me every time. I still am not quite used to it because to me it's like a dog-eat-dog world out there. But it's not. It's the opposite in Nashville, and it sounds like New York is the same way. It's just like, no, okay, yeah, we're both dogs, but we're both going to eat, right? We need to eat the food that's out there. So let's work together, and they make beautiful music in collaboration.
Yeah, it is. That is what's so. It is tricky. Any aspect of entertainment and the music industry is no joke. Everyone's you're clawing your way to get to a certain point. But I think once you're in a room with somebody, once you're at a certain place, everybody wants to do their best work. Everybody wants to succeed. The hard part can be just getting in that room.
Right, yeah. Because the room is where the decisions are made. I'm trying to quote Hamilton, but I did a really poor job. But the sausage. The room where it happens. The room where it happens.
You want to be in the room where it happens. And it's funny, like in that show, of course, Hamilton's frustrated because he's not in the room where it happens. And so it can be very, very frustrating for anyone who actually wants to collaborate, wants to make art, wants to, make something. You're always clamoring to get into the room, and sometimes the doors open, often they're not.
Have you learned some lessons over the years? Because you've done this a while now, for somebody who's going to jump into it, and hopefully they do it, in the ways that you've suggested. But lessons along the way to help provide access to that door. Is it about who you know? Is it more about how you pour into your craft? Are there some tidbits of things you could share?
Sure. It's both of those things you just mentioned. Because even if you have all the connections in the world, if you don't have any craft, you might get one shot at something that other people would not get, but that's going to be it. And it's not going to be fulfilling. It's not going to be satisfying. And there won't be a follow-up.
Interesting.
But also, for writers especially, and actually it's interesting, a lot of, I imagine, I know this is true for actors, I imagine this is true for musicians as well. I know this is true for visual artists. A lot of artists are actually they're introverted. They can be shy.
Mm-hmm.
They can turn that on when they need to. Performing is, a different thing. It's a persona. For an actor, they're playing a character. But in their private lives, they might actually be quite shy.
Mm-hmm.
So networking is not something fun for them to do. This is not everyone, right? I'm envious of those who really have the skill. I've had to work really hard at the social aspect of things. Not that I'm an asocial person, but especially for writers. Writers are by nature introverts at heart. You have to be, because you are sitting alone
for hours on end.
For hours and hours, with a piece of paper. And you are. You might work on something for years before you get to actually collaborate with people. And it's like playwrights are required to have different skill sets because you have to work alone for a long period of time. And then if you're lucky enough to get production, then you're suddenly collaborating and you need to be a good collaborator. Novelists don't have this. Novelists and poets don't have this.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good point.
They do. They get to work in private. Yeah, they get to work in private, and that's that. Now, mind you, but they have to do public readings. And the social media aspect of this is so important now. So, but also, this is where the networking is really important as well. You have to, and not just meeting people, but meaningful networking, and that means keeping up with people.
Mm-hmm.
And that has different forms. But part of that, of course, is also going to support fellow artists.
Interesting. Which you admittedly love to do because you love going to the theater anyway and anything surrounding that. So that's a natural.
I do. Yeah, I do. But sometimes, sometimes it's exhausting.
Long hours and
and not everything, not everything that your friends do is going to be successful. Just as like everything I have done has not been totally successful. So not every evening is full of bliss.
Mm-hmm.
It can be the opposite of that. But yeah, and and not only is it going to support the artist, but often, waiting afterwards to talk to them or shooting them a note or shooting them a letter. It's showing, it's just like with many things in life, it's about showing up.
Yeah.
You have to show up. So and then there's that question about with limited time, do I show up or do I stay home and develop my craft?
Yeah.
You have to make that. You have to. Yeah, that choice. You're always making that choice.
Okay, so running through my mind right now is, for whatever reason, in whatever movie, I couldn't even name the movie. That's been in several, but like you've got the scene with a networking scene, right? It's a party, everyone's drinking and talking, and you're at the end of writing your piece, and it's ready for a playwright. Because back in the day, and I'm probably going to date myself here a little bit, but back in the day, it was like if a musician had a song, a demo or whatever, it's, hey, can I give this to you? Let me give you this cassette. That's how, right? That reference. But nowadays, you don't carry around a tome necessarily, or do you?
Right. No. I mean, well, of course, now with PDFs, right, you can just simply email stuff.
Mm-hmm. But then you're not face to face with the person to and is that necessary? It's necessary to make the contact with them, to do the small talk, to exchange information, and then later comes the exchange of the work, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
A very simple answer, yes. I mean, but although that said, I know there are screenwriters who just simply they will show up with hard copies. And you can do that. I think at this point, if you really want to stick out, you could put a hard copy of the script in someone's hands, and it would be very different from.
Interesting. So this pendulum has swung the other way. It used to be.
It is. But you want someone to give a thoughtful read, right? And the likelihood of someone giving a thoughtful read is going to be much greater if you've actually created a real connection with them that actually made that person want to ask you to read your script. Because it's one thing they hand the script out, but they have to read it.
Right. Or the right, it's becomes a doorstop.
That's or right into the bin.
Yeah, right in the bin. So fascinating. So,
and it's also, and on top of all this, of course, is you have to develop such a thick skin because, the amount of rejection you're going to get is pretty insane.
And the rejections, have they come in various colors for you in terms of severity? Like, I would imagine, okay, I'm so sorry, Randall, this was really good. I followed the story and it's good, but this, and this, there's a little constructive criticism too, all out. Like, this is the biggest piece of trash I've ever, have you gotten all of that?
You typically don't get, you don't get demolished until you get reviews. Unless it's like one of my close, like I do have a few friends who are like early readers. I remember one play I wrote probably around 2016. That was right before President Trump got elected. So, it might have been 2016 then. He elected that year. So, they said, do not show this play to anyone.
just tuck it away.
Yes, but mind you, hilariously, just to be spiteful, I submitted it to several big playwriting conferences and got accepted to one with that play. Yeah, just to prove her wrong. But the play has not had a great life. Which is its own thing. But sometimes your plays are just not right for certain venues, for certain people. And now we're in an era where, because theater hasn't really recovered from the COVID pandemic, so there are shorter seasons and whatnot, and fun. People haven't returned to theater like in numbers they used to, and there just isn't the funding. So, a one character play is going to be much more desirable than a 10 character play right now, just for, especially if actors are being paid.
Right. Budgetary purposes. That makes sense.
Absolutely, that's a huge thing right now. So, your play might be rejected just on those terms alone. But in terms of the colors, 2 days ago, I got a rejection from a playwrights conference in California, and it basically said, "We're not even going to evaluate your application." So
they certainly
that was a new one for me. I thought, wow, I'm not even going to be evaluated. So.
But was that having to do with a resume or with just your name starts with the letter R?
I know. I think they were inundated, so they might have capped it. Hilarious. I was talking to another. It's funny. I told another playwriting friend to make sure that she applied for the same conference. She texted me this afternoon saying, "Oh, thank you for letting me know they're looking at my play."
And you let her in the door.
Exactly. So she is being evaluated. And mind you, they probably I guess they just have to limit it. But weirdly, I asked her, I said, I don't even remember what the application entails. I don't know what's being evaluated to be evaluated.
Yes.
Because my rule of thumb has also been, I've learned, just apply for things and, maybe put it in a spreadsheet, make a note of it somewhere, and then move on to the next thing, because you don't have control over what's being accepted. And so this is a perfect example of that. I don't even remember I know what the conference is. It's a great conference, but I don't, a development, opportunity, but I don't remember what the criteria were to be evaluated.
Yeah. And are the conferences you're mentioning, is that, besides obviously networking, I can imagine that, but a sort of a good training ground for work? Because when I talk to musicians, they perform. They're out there doing gigs nightly, if not several times a week, and you're not afforded that luxury of just putting your work out nightly for people. You're still working on it, or it's not ready, or it's just not there. Are these conferences good for that? And it's like a good reason to do as many as you can?
Each one's different. The number of conferences have gone down significantly in the past few years in development opportunities. So the ones that do exist have become, in a way, by default, more prestigious.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
And so they're very hard to get into. I've gotten into two in recent years. One of them I'm still shocked I got into. So really like 1% got in, about like 1,000. I don't know how that happened, to be honest. But that's also part of the game, right?
Yeah, of course.
You can't be chosen if you don't apply.
Right.
And there was a period, I will say, this was in 2001, in the spring, so like people still were not going out because of COVID, and at least not in New York. In the different parts of the country acted differently, but theaters were not open yet for sure. But I would apply to all these things, and so a lot of plays were being done online or audio plays, and I applied to all. It's like for colleges, right? You have all your safety schools, and then your reaches,
okay, yeah.
And then you might apply to an Ivy League or two, or that kind of tier. This was what this was. I thought, okay, I will apply to this, but I will not get in, and I'll apply to all these other things as well. Well, I got into nothing but the top one. I got endless rejections, and then suddenly got this yes. So you just don't know.
Interesting. Yeah.
You don't know. But you have to. Actually, what's the original question? I feel like I have skirted the answer to the original question. It was about the conferences. And so, for playwright, the conferences sometimes, so they're all different. Some have different. Sometimes you have actors there who are reading your work and you're discussing it. Definitely a major networking thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And so, especially for writers, because you work alone, so often it's your only opportunity to actually be with other writers. Which I always love, because you don't get to be with them. Like, even when you have productions, you're not with other playwrights, you're with actors and designers and a director. Maybe if you're doing a musical, maybe a composer, but
yeah. Do you swap? Sorry to interrupt. Do you swap like whole plays and say, "Will you read my stuff?" And then they hold themselves up and dedicate to you, and they do, like you said, a dedicated read? Or is it just like, here's a snippet of my kind of writing? What do you think? Because you're asking questions from each other, right?
Yeah, it all depends, right? So sometimes some workshops will just do a scene, like 10 or 15 minutes. I do have a writing group now that you can ask, to be done what you want to be done. So like, I had a completed play. I didn't need to hear it, but I want just their feedback on it.
Mm-hmm.
So some conferences have had no work performed. I've just gone to take workshops to meet people. Other times I've had my entire play read in front of an audience.
Oh, wow.
Yes, they differ. And so to get that practice, as opposed to musicians, you have to go out and gig and do it.
Mm-hmm.
One hard thing about theater is, you don't get to really, you don't get to do that until you get a full production. You don't get to perform. You can do a reading. You don't need the big budget for that, but you do need the actors and a space. But even then, like readings can be deceptive, I find. And so, because the truth is, you really only learn the craft when you have a full production and you're in the rehearsal room and you're learning with everyone else at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And you've gone through that process, and it has. After that, do you approach a new piece with? You're a learned person, and you learn all the time. So I imagine you take that information and those lessons learned, and you apply it into the new piece of work.
I do my best to.
You do your best to. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Of course, that's the. Like compared to what I knew from my first, few shows, yeah, absolutely. You're like, you learn a lot about working with actors, of course, mm-hmm. and directors, and different theaters. Theaters are not, it's not monocultural, the theater world. Different theaters have different vibes and different audiences.
Really interesting. So if pardon this question, this is going to be like real out of left field for you, I'm sure, but. So off Broadway and Broadway, would you focus purposely in a microcosm way on a particular theater in the off-Broadway segment. And can you clarify those two terms for me?
Sure. It's actually pretty basically it's contractual. Broadway houses are houses mainly that are literally on or right off Broadway, the Avenue in New York City.
Okay.
And they're houses that have 500 seats or more. Off Broadway is, I think it's 100 or 101 seats to $4.99. And they don't have to be anywhere near Broadway, right?
Because they're off it.
Yeah, because they're off it, right? And then you have off Broadway, which is, I think it was just 900 seats or less. And so they're it's all contractual, these things. Broadway is very commercial, of course, so you have to fill those houses. So a lot of pieces, actually, to my mind, the most interesting pieces that come to Broadway are things that have started off Broadway or started in London, or maybe in Chicago, maybe regionally. Hamilton did, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was off Broadway at the Public Theater. So a lot more daring things end up getting the rapturous reviews, and if they're deemed commercial enough, then they can often transfer to Broadway. Because they're basically a few Broadway landlords. It's really a real estate business.
Yeah, that's so
and that's always shocking to people. It's really a real estate business. Yeah. Huh. And so because Manhattan is an island, real estate is outrageous.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I know that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And that includes, that goes for theater. So if you think about theater being a real estate business and about the contracts, I know this is, for many people like, I want to hear about the artistry involved. Well, the truth is Broadway is commercial, it's business. You do have some nonprofit theaters that have bought and taken over some Broadway houses, so they're sort of run as nonprofit Broadway houses now, this sort of hybrid. Uh-huh. But even then, often plays will have won some awards off Broadway to get to that level. Hadestown, the musical, started off Broadway at New York Theater Workshop. A play called Prayer for the French Republic just transferred from Manhattan Theater Club, did it at their off Broadway house about a year and a half ago, and it's just now on Broadway after it won the Dramatists Award for Best Play. Huh. So you have that. All that said, you can write specifically for Broadway in the sense that you can try to create. You might be, if you're commissioned by a producer, like we're going to try to create this show for Broadway. You're trying to write a Broadway musical, for example. Mm-hmm. There are far more musicals than plays these days.
Right.
Plays for Broadway, the way the economics are now, you pretty much need to have an A-list name attached to an actor to help sell tickets. Mm-hmm. Or you have the sterling resume or the playwright so well known, like Tom Stoppard with Leopoldstadt from last season. Like Tom Stoppard, has been an established name for decades.
Yeah.
So it doesn't need an A-list name star. But yes, even within that realm, the off-Broadway houses, like the Public Manhattan Theater Club, Playwrights Horizon, they all have specific things that they sort of do. And it's a matter of the Atlantic, it's sort of a matter of can you get in them and you have connections there, and it's an interesting, it's a big challenge. It's hard, very hard, and of course within those institutions, these nonprofit institutions, of course the people who lead those, they change too, so everything's always in flux.
Interesting. Wow, is that sort of the holy grail? Being in a production in a Broadway house, is that the end of the line, the top of the heap for a playwright to have their piece there, or would you personally have a different goal for, like, you could point to and say, I did it, this is like the best I could ever be, the best reward? Is that what people have to do, is to be like that, or is there some other goal that maybe the layman doesn't know about, that if you a Tony or whatever, what for you personally, and then maybe generally as a community, what's the the best? What shows that you really did it?
Everyone's gonna have a different answer for that, right? For sure. Not everyone. I don't necessarily aspire to Broadway because very few plays go to Broadway these days. Now, if I were a writer, say 40 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, Broadway would absolutely be my goal. A much healthier ecosystem for the theater industry. It's unrecognizable today by today's standards.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the great thing about a Broadway show would be the money.
Yeah.
I mean, and then you would be eligible for a Tony Award. The most prestigious award, I think, among playwrights is the Pulitzer, because that is, that could be for off-Broadway or for Broadway.
Interesting. I had no idea that there was that. I think of newspaper writers for that only.
Yeah, no, right. But there is a Pulitzer Prize for drama.
Okay, wonderful.
And now they have like a short list of you could be one of the three finalists. And other people may disagree with that. I mean, I know for a long time my goal was to have a show off Broadway, and I got that. I've got a few of those now.
That's
so
fantastic.
That was thank you. So that was huge for me. I was very excited about that because then typically you're reviewed by the major outlets like New York Times and that of course has become a challenge as well. That's a different discussion, but you get all the serious reviews and you're taken seriously, and that's a huge thing. But also plays can be nominated for Pulitzers from regional theaters too. They don't even have to be in New York. So I don't know if there's a whole, I think many playwrights now would say, well, the Holy Grail is Broadway so I can make some real money because the money situation is so desperate.
I did want to talk about that because with COVID especially, you had me thinking so hard about with it, I can imagine where your revenue comes from in stream, but then that whole industry really shutting down like almost everything did. How was it for you?
That was pretty damn depressing. It was dire. I mean, literally the theater doors were shut, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the short doors were shut. So weirdly, I did have a play, a children's theater did one of my plays, I think in that summer of 2020. I had written something that weirdly had already talked about being socially distanced. It was, part of the plot.
Oh, and okay. So it fit perfectly.
Well, someone asked me, and they had the kids on to perform 6 feet apart. And I mean, of course, I saw it online, of course, because I wasn't there in person. No one was. And I thought, I have no idea if this actually works or not, but there it's been produced. Incredibly, I have made some money this year from theater when no one else has.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
But but for most people, including myself, that was just one tiny thing. But all revenue just stopped. I think a lot of people leave the business. And also, I sat down and wrote my first, not my first, but in a long time. I thought it's time for me to write a horror film. And that's what so many playwrights they've gone to TV and film, because the streamers, especially prior to 2019, were making endless amounts of product. Now that there's been a huge correction made, but the money's so much better in TV and film.
I imagine, yeah.
And so when I thought, and I've always wanted to write a horror film because I love horror. So I wrote it, and I'm happy with it. And I'm going to have to start sending that out. I was waiting for the actor strike and the writer strike to end. That was most of last year.
Yes.
But yeah, I think many people also they pivoted, what can I do? And also, I did write a novel, my first novel in 2020 as well, which also I need to go back and edit. Yeah, so a lot of us pivoted. What can you do? But also, I did write plays.
Yeah, so you hunkered into your work, and you
I did.
You probably just didn't have the luxurious dining that
no,
like
no,
everyone.
I was cooking more, right? You know,
Yes.
and so when I'm cooking, it's much less luxurious. Yeah, it was definitely hunkered down. I used that time I went and got my MFA during the shutdown, and that also required me to get a lot of work done. So I didn't have that degree. So I managed to be somewhat productive during all that mess. But the industry has not. The industry was sort of bulldozed, of course, and it has not fully recovered.
Yeah, I like so many have, and if for me it's hard. I'm in a steady, I'm in education, and so we made adjustments too, but it was pretty continuous in terms of stability, and I feel for everyone who went through that, and I often forget until I talk to someone and they tell me, they walk me through, well, yeah, okay, I couldn't do what I would normally do, and they had to make adaptations. So bravo to you for delving into all of it and making the best of it, and here we are kind of on the other side, knock on wood. And
yeah, thank you. I'm not sure. I feel like of course a lot of that time I was rather than patting stuff on the back, I was sort of languishing because it was so depressing.
Yeah.
Because theater is such a large part of my life, and suddenly, the doors are literally shut. There's nothing happening. So, but mind you, also I had the privilege. If you're in education, teachers had to. School couldn't stop, and the amount of pivoting the educators had to do was, and the students, in those classes. It was pretty incredible and exhausting. It was exhausting, I think, for all of you guys.
Yeah, it was, and scary and frightful at the same time. Just like, okay, well, we're here, and people say we shouldn't be, and because here in the South, especially, I think New York was a little bit later, but as soon as it was feasible to open back up after shutdown, it happened in my area especially, right. And I would be getting correspondences from people like, really, you guys are really having in-person classes now? And so there was just that unknown, and and a lot of uncertainty, that not to the degree that you faced, I don't think, but it was a different experience.
Yeah, I think who wasn't affected, right?
Right. Yeah. No, it touched literally so many people. I wanted to talk, since we mentioned Hamilton, I just had to bring up I'll call him the master craftsman, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe if you know what this magic sauce is, because he's been doing it a while, but Lin-Manuel and his just really revolutionizing, and this is, I'm putting words in that you should say, but he's, for me, like I went to plays in college, and I have been to a few in my adult life, and I always like to appreciate them that way, but then all of a sudden in my face is a soundtrack. My daughters couldn't put it down, and I was knee deep in the plot, and I was relearning history, and it was alive in my head. What do you think is his how does he do it? How has he made it to this point in what you work in? Like, is he give me your thoughts on Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Yeah, interesting. I've never met him in person. I've had friends who worked with him. I say because also when I had the chance to meet with Lynn, he goes by Lynn in person.
Okay.
I'll call him Lin-Manuel because we're not. I'm not.
You're not to that point yet. Got you.
No. But I didn't realize. Oh, I need to get to know Lin-Manuel. He's it started with In the Heights.
Mm-hmm.
It's a musical that he developed when he was in college, of all places.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, he worked on it for years and years, and then it hit. And actually, that was another show that was off Broadway that transferred to Broadway, and it's a very fun jubilant musical. I really enjoyed it when I saw it. What he did with Hamilton, and I've taught Hamilton at university, just because when it was all the rage, I thought, also like your daughter, mentioned who couldn't stop playing it. I thought, yeah, if I put Hamilton on the syllabus,
you're gonna have a full class.
I had a very full class.
Yep.
I made them read a lot more than that, but I made them read on Hamilton, and that there's that book that that he came out with. It's what's interesting, is that he basically musicalized with rap the entire book, the whole libretto. You've got this enormous amount of story being told via song. So it's not like, it's not. Yeah, it's not like a book, and often with musicals, is music and lyrics by and book by. And in Hamilton, they initially did they did have a book writer, and then he was just writing the songs and music, and it wasn't working. They could tell, because what Lin-Manuel did was, because if you read, and mind you, if you hear the cast recording, you are hearing the whole thing from start to finish, right? It's not like most cast recordings of Broadway musicals, you are hearing just the songs. You don't know what the story is. Well, in Hamilton, you are hearing everything.
Yes.
If so he his idea to use all these different forms, because it's not just rap, or hip hop. It's really more hip hop, but then you also get these other songs that come in too. And of course, you have King George with his, sort of the Monkees inspired stuff, the 60s,
yes.
British music. So he plays around constantly, and he, hats off. He created something different. He created something new. And from my experience, about every 20 years, you have a musical that just sort of explodes like this and hits the public consciousness as a whole. And I've been around long enough to see that twice now. Because right when I moved to New York was right when Rent happened.
Okay. Yes, of course.
And that was so massive. That was also pretty much pre-social media. Trust me, if social media had existed when that thing hit, because especially with Jonathan Larson, the composer, and he too wrote the book, and he died before the first preview. So there's a show about the tragedy of death, coming too quickly for young artists in New York City. Well, his composer died before he saw it go to be staged.
Oh my goodness, I didn't know that.
Yeah, the story's incredible. And it's fitting, that I mentioned, so that was like 1996, and then basically 20 years later, 2016, Hamilton, and 1976 was a chorus line.
Yes.
So you have these huge, massive shows that break with form. They're different. And it's fascinating that Lin-Manuel actually directed Tick, Tick, Boom, the film with Andrew Garfield, which is about Jonathan Larson.
Okay.
And it's that, and mind you, he did a brilliant job of it. I thought, wow, he can really direct. I thought that was one of the finer films 2 years ago. So actually, my esteem, and also, of course, the score he had for what's the one that's set in Colombia? The animated film.
Oh,
we don't talk about Bruno and all.
Yeah. Right. I know.
Yeah. So like that, I can't. The title's escaping me. My apologies, but I saw that in the cinema. I actually went. This people still weren't going back, and it was mainly me and maybe two other people. And suddenly I thought, oh my gosh, his score to this is so good. And of course, we don't talk about Bruno became a hit on the pop chart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Literally, the crossover is amazing. Like 2 or 3 songs from that became huge, huge hits. So he's a special artist. I think if you create something really new, and he did, and also, I mean, let's be fair. I also want to give full credit, give him his full flowers, as they say. When I remember seeing the advertisement for Hamilton was off Broadway at the Public Theater before it opened, and it said, "Okay, Lin-Manuel, his new project is this hip hop musical about one of the founding fathers.
And just that description alone, we'd be like, what?
Oh, no, I thought, oh, hell no, he has lost his mind. I vividly remember thinking, awful, what has happened here? This is awful. But, he read that biography, and he saw it in a different way. That's true artistry at work. So he captured lightning in a bottle. So for him to read that book, say, oh, I can turn this into a hip hop musical, and then turn out what eventually we now know as Hamilton. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, and he did all that, and then, of course, it just all came together. He really captured the imagination. And young people love that cast recording, as you well know.
Absolutely. And I probably have all the songs memorized, and I haven't heard them.
You probably do. And then as a result, their parents heard it too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was in our car. We'd drive to school, and that would be the soundtrack, and I would know. I just found it so. It was almost like listening to an audiobook. It was I could picture. I think it's the music. You've spoken to me on that, because music is one of my loves, and I think just the way that the words have been crafted through those songs, and the variety. That's a great point. Is there's like an extreme variety of music in there. It paints that visual so well that I was almost not disappointed, but to see it, I saw it, not a TV version, but it was I think a film.
It was one of those taped and then broadcast on HBO.
Yeah. I wasn't nearly as impressed or overwhelmed by it, because I wanted to keep what I had thought in my mind and as the treasure, right?
That's right. And that's actually a great point, because I talk about this a lot with fellow writers when I'm teaching writing. Nothing can compete with the audience's imagination. Mm-hmm. What any audience member imagines is better than anything we can show them.
But is there craft there in spurring the imagination on to cause it to be active?
Definitely. There are things you can do to, like I wrote a horror play on commission, and I thought about this a lot. I realized, what I can do with sounds and the idea of something before the audience sees it will be very effective. I'm not going to reveal a lot until I need to.
Interesting.
Because I knew, so absolutely. There are ideas there, and there's a craft there, but you can manage that. And it's not just for horror and thrillers. You can do it in other things too. I mean, look, you heard that cast recording over and over again in your car, and because every word is covered in the cast recording, you were able to completely visualize and imagine the story and how it looked.
Yeah, I had buildings in my mind. I had that tent.
Yeah, sure.
Talking to Washington and pleading for the job and all of that. It was just
right.
What?
And actually, when it comes to it, that set is quite simple, right?
Yeah.
The set to Hamilton, the actual physical set, and the costumes are not very complex either. Mm-hmm. The choreography is amazing. The choreography is endless and exhausting, but yeah,
and the singing is really good because it's challenging.
Of course, right? Yeah, of course. So, and you've got great performances. You've got all that, but what you've managed to probably looks fancier than what you ended up than what is actual there.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely, and that might come from cinematic representations of things that I've seen and special effects and whatnot. So that is a whole other discussion that causes my mind to go in crazy ways. And so, yeah, you're right. It is very elaborate in there. I could tell you that.
Right. Of course it is. I mean, I think about this all the time. How do you conjure, and songwriters do this too, right? I think about Tracy Chapman's Fast Car. Mm-hmm. Yep. That story she tells, you visualize that.
You really do. Yeah.
You really do. So the best songs do, of course, songs do this all the time. And of course, with music, you can hit emotional buttons that even different emotional buttons that you can hit just with words alone.
Yeah, from shared experiences. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Wow. That's really good. I was just thinking too, so when you're writing, because during COVID, you purposely wrote in different areas, what would be your approach, or what is the typical approach writing for stage versus writing for film? Because to me, they're both, as a layman, I'm like, it's a script and the actors are going to do what they're going to do either on the screen or on the stage. But is it a divergence? Like, are they really different in the way from the beginning, the way you derive that work?
I think they should be.
They should be. Okay.
Yes, because first of all, film is very much a director's medium. So, which is why scriptwriters always complain about the amount of respect they get. And especially in film, it's interesting. TV writers typically end up being showrunners, right? They end up being the bosses. So there's a lot more respect for writers in television than there is in film. But in film is, a lot of this came from the French, God bless them, and auteur theories and the idea that directors are kings. So in film, also film's much more of a visual medium, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and also you're not constrained by, there's a fixed space with theater for the most part. You do have things that, but it's a very fixed space and fixed personnel. But, and you don't have, VFX, you don't have huge special effects. I mean, some shows do, like Back to the Future, which is running right now on Broadway, has this huge thing with the DeLorean flying out, right?
Right.
But that's spectacle. But for the most part, most shows don't have millions and millions of dollars for that.
And that would be something that would just definitely be a deterrent if someone is doing a good read on your work and they're like, wait, you need a car to fly, or you need this? That's
100%.
Okay.
Like do you have a fixed set? Do you have multiple sets? Can this be done in a black box with a chair and a table? Is it about the actors and the words? Is it a musical? Because of course musicals require musicians, possibly a choreographer. So musicals are much more expensive than plays. But on the other hand, musicals are more popular than plays.
Yeah, so they'll fill the seats more. Interesting.
For sure. So, but yeah, all these things matter. So it's so actually when I started to write the screenplay, I had to really it's not like just writing for different medium. I had to really rethink. The formatting is completely different. There's often a lot less dialogue. In a play, dialogue drives the story.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, I would say 9% of the time. Not all plays, of course. There's for every art thing, as you know, the rules are broken. But for film, think about how many films you can easily have 20 minutes without a word being spoken in a film.
And because it's a battle scene or whatever, and you're just showing
exactly.
Action. I see.
And you have editors, right? You can start and stop. Boom, 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 boom.
Yes.
You can't do that. You can't do that on stage.
Yeah.
Transitions take time. I mean, you can make them as fast as you can get them, but you can't. Think about like in film on like split screens, right?
Mm-hmm.
That kind of technique, which Brian De Palma uses a lot. You can't jump from here to there to there to there.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. That I love the way you've described that. I can understand it totally. So moving on to how you do your work, because there's going to be someone out here in the world that's going to listen to this and go, it sounds. I've always loved plays. I've always loved writing. They're going to be you, but at the very beginning stages of this, and I think this would be a good area to. Give them a leg up. It's hard to know what to do in certain areas, but this one, I know you've evolved in different ways. But when you sit down with a brand new project in mind and you're going to write, do you go directly to MacBook? Do you go directly to your phone with notes? Because I know musicians will be like they get their recorder out from their phone because they're in the middle of somewhere and inspiration strikes and they're just going to sing into the phone. Right? They're not going to get in the studio.
Yeah.
So what is it for you?
Yeah, it's interesting because you hear about different artists, like when the muse hits, you have to listen. And if you don't respond, you might miss it. Occasionally, for the most part, it's I sit down to a Mac. I use their writing software, Pages.
Okay.
But I like to do when I can rewrites on big projects. I like to do that by hand on paper with red pen and a hard copy. So I think it's
like how do you feel when you're striking and editing it? Is that a productive feeling to you? Like, ooh, this is forming. This is the sculpture coming out of the marble, or is it
absolutely
like,
yes,
okay.
yes, yeah. I tried to one of my friends said write fast, edit slowly. So it's a great piece of advice for people, for creatives, I think. And mind you, I struggle to do this myself. So, but to write without being self-critical all the time, to create, just go that first draft.
Gotcha.
I struggle with that because I like to go back the next day and just read what I wrote. My process is I typically write, then I sit back down again the next day. I read what I've written and go through that, and then proceed when I finish that and move on. As a result, my first drafts tend to be pretty strong, but there are times when I have forced myself to just try to write from start to finish a draft, and then when I print it out, I just finished a play today, a new play.
Oh, congratulations!
About an hour. Thank you. An hour before we started talking. So I probably won't print that out yet. I'm going to probably work with an actor on that at some point before. And it's a shorter play. But yeah, but then when I print it out, especially in rehearsals, and I have a red pen, and also if I'm in rehearsal, so before rehearsals, I just mark. This doesn't work. This is definitely not going to be funny. This is going to be horrible. So
yes.
You just cut all the first draft stuff out. But then when you're rehearsal, you'll hear good actors, or possibly not great actors, stumble over lines. If they keep stumbling,
okay, that's a clue.
It's probably your dialogue. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you start getting notes from if you have a great collaboration with your director. You talk about what you've seen, like what's working, what's not, or some great idea will come out of that. And then this is the stuff I love. I love working with actors and the director to make a piece better. You get all these talents together. That's really special. So, but it starts off on starts off for me in the Mac. And
is that
I tried to be like this. My goal my resolution for 2024 was to sit down at my computer and write every day, no matter what the day is like, for at least an hour.
Okay. Yes, that's a good discipline practice. I like it.
Yeah. I did it years ago as a challenge, a behest of my husband. And I'm stunned at how productive I was. And even while it was one of those pieces I wrote in that year, just premiered last year in the United States. And so you don't know. That's the other thing about the networking. When you're meeting people, you're sort of always planting seeds. You just don't know how long things going to take to actually to bloom.
Yeah, to come to fruition.
And they might not. And they might not. Yeah, to come to fruition. They might not. But I couldn't believe I laughed. I realized, that play that just premiered, you wrote in 1 month during that year that you promised to write every day. And what I discovered, I think every artist could benefit from this, is your subconscious does so much work when you do it every day. It just does so much work for you. So ideas come to you, and the discipline, and you get in the routine. And I will also say it was a bit hellish for me when like January the 1st. I did not want to write on January the 1st.
Because of New Year's Eve, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just also I had not a lot. I didn't write a whole lot. I had a lot of shows open in 2023, so I had, which I was very lucky and fortunate about. But as a result, I didn't focus on writing new material very much. So I got out. I did rewrites for the plays that were in production and rehearsal.
So
but
you were busy, but not with your dedication.
But not creating music. Yeah, exactly. So, oh my gosh, January the 1st and the 2nd and the 3rd and the 4th, it was. I had friends in town. Everyone comes to New York, and I thought, oh, I don't want to. It was hellish. But I thought, oh, this is just like, if you exercise for the first time having not moved in a long time.
Yep.
Yeah, you feel it. It's that soreness kicks in. It feels different. But I think for artists, and of course it's challenging for actors, and for singers who are not singer-songwriters, they don't write the songs, they just perform, right? How do you get that experience? How do you have the daily discipline when your discipline requires you to perform?
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always very interested in that with actors and singers who don't create their own work, and that's when I think it's helpful to take classes and lessons and also, frankly, read and see stuff.
Yeah, and I think it's unfortunately, I don't want to put a damper on the current generation, but I do work with youth of today, and I think that discipline is a little bit lost in some kids, and it's a lesson that could be learned on anyone in any area of life is if you're developing in that area, give it time and put time into it. So I applaud you for even. So did you work on January 1st, or did you put double? I
did.
Okay, congratulations.
No. That was part of it, right? I was one of my friends, and so she goes, "Oh," because it was, I kid you not, it was like 10:30 at night, and one day I'm like, "Oh heck, I have not risen today." She said, "Oh, just double up tomorrow." I said, "Nope, that's not how this works."
Yeah.
And mind you, it was a deeply, writing 11 o'clock at night outside. It was deeply, deeply unpleasant.
Did anything come out of that was salvageable?
It was. Well, it's part of that play that I just finished today.
Okay.
So maybe I took a few steps forward. Who knows? But that's the other thing, right? Not every day is going to be a great day.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, for any artist, like every time we sit down to create, it's going to be a masterpiece. To go back to Lin-Manuel Miranda, when he was writing Hamilton, he would send songs to Stephen Sondheim, who was one of his mentors. And Sondheim would say, keep the variety going, keep changing it up. Like, he kept giving him feedback.
Right.
Which probably means that not all of those songs he initially wrote, I'm sure they were successful.
Yeah, I heard one story. I don't know if you heard this story too, and I don't know where he was, but it was an awards show for something that he had done before, and he was in the process of writing Hamilton, and he was on the way, probably like in limo and tuxedo, got an idea for a song, and turned around, went back and finished the song, and didn't go to the show. And I might have the story.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was he interrupted something they was supposed to do, an obligation of sorts, and went back in the commitment to the art and getting it out. So,
wow.
Yeah. When I hear that about people, I kind of I bow, like you're in your element and you're where you need to be. And the commitment is, I see it in athletes and it's all over the place. It's just, I'm sorry, I got to put my blinders on because I'm in the mode. So you're that
that's I don't think I've ever done it to that extreme, but I definitely know the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem is, it's hard to. There are social costs with that.
Yes.
Your relationships with your friends, with your loved ones, your family. When I first started writing plays, this was during the big clubbing days, New York, in the mid '90s, and not, in the New York City. My friends would go out and want me to come, but I knew that if I went out with them, they didn't come home till 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning.
That would
right?
destroy you. Yes.
That's it. Yeah, there's no. So I thought I never went. I did not go once because I do have some regrets because I would have loved to have had the experience, but I was working at Newsweek magazine at the time, so I needed those when I was writing. I needed that time for myself, and I love doing it. I don't want to stop the impulse. I don't want to stop the muse. And I even started taking, I would take sick days just to write at my vacation days.
Interesting.
Yeah. I was trying to put vacation days next to, holidays and things so that I could have like 4 or 5 days of just straight writing without interruption.
Yeah, that says a lot. It absolutely says a lot to what's in your heart. And what do you remember the moment when I don't know if you put in your notice for what you were doing or something else happened, but that switch from a quote unquote 9 to 5 to what you're doing now it's got to be vastly different. Do you remember the trepidation that you experienced, or do you remember the excitement, or what was happening in your brain? Jay, I feel like I'm still experiencing that trepidation. Yeah, as are many of us, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in my last corporate job was in 2001. And I remember, not to make this, turn this sad, but I witnessed the 9/11 attacks.
Oh, right, because you were living there. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was actually I woke up early. It's interesting. I usually I didn't go work until noon. But that morning, at like 4 a.m, I woke up with a horrible feeling.
Interesting.
And I thought, well, you're awake. You might as well go.
How far was your office from there?
I was actually right next to the Empire State Building, so the other big landmark. I was high up, so I could see it all. So I was, most of my colleagues were not even there. But I remember as it happened, and it's funny because I actually had something due for another some magazine for outside the work. I remember turning that in that morning, and then the attacks happened. And I remember watching those huge burning buildings going down. It was terrifying, and thinking, because also the corporation I was working for at the time, one of those offices was in one of those towers.
Oh, really? Did you watch?
Yeah, that could have randomly been.
Were you up in your building, or were you down by the time you were watching?
Oh, I was high. I was
really?
up. Wow. Oh yeah, no, I saw it. And so, and I was actually sort of worried. I thought, they're going to also try to hit the Empire State Building. That's another big. That's the next tall landmark. And also it was so chaotic. I won't go into all the. And in the moment, there's so many questions and so much uncertainty and panic happening. Like, is there poisonous gas being released into the streets? Do we stay inside? Do we go outside? A bridge has been hit. Of course, that did not happen, but we didn't know. It was happening so quickly. But everyone who in the corporate office that was in the building, they died.
Oh my gosh!
And I remember thinking, oh wow, if this were your last day, how would you feel about the scope of your life and what you've done?
Yeah, that actually ran through your mind.
Oh, absolutely the moment. That was September then. I mean, and then I was literally witnessing thousands of people die. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the end of that year was my last corporate gig. So I started. I created my own business, but sort of left the path.
That left the path to it. So that was kind of you. Maybe certainly you had because you were taking vacation days to write, so you had your head in going. We'll call it independent. But that was a catalyst, certainly for you.
Yeah, I had 2 shows open in actually one opened in the summer of 2001. My first professional production.
Okay.
And then my second, that was in Cincinnati, and the second one opened a few days after 9/11 in New York City.
Wow.
And we weren't going to, but that's when the mayor begged everyone to open up and resume activities because people needed the relief. So, yeah, we resumed rehearsals and we did open. But but yeah, so I was definitely, at this point, things were starting to happen. But I certainly wasn't making enough money, but also, it was a quick realization, you don't know when your time is going to be called up.
Yeah. And do you feel, how do you feel now? Sorry to interrupt. How do you feel now? Like you've got a body of work, you've got a catalog, so to speak, to use musical terms anyway.
Yeah.
You've got some stuff to stand on. Are you feeling good? Like if tomorrow was the day, and you're leaving behind your stuff, do you like what you've done so far? Do you have ambitions for something way different and bigger that is burning for you right now?
Great question. I do have a lot of stuff I still want to do, but yeah, I would not feel the same, because of course I had these thoughts again during the pandemic, especially the early days, and when it hit New York City, and like a lot of people I know died. So I thought, well, also we didn't know the extent how bad this was going to be. Yeah, I do have a body of work, and I don't regret what I've done. There's more I want to do, but yeah, my feeling, like if I were to witness that 9/11 thing happening today, would be different. I wouldn't feel anxious about my decision. I don't regret what I've done.
That's good.
Now, I'm not regretting in 15, 20 years when it's time for me to retire. Because you take such a risk in this country. The United States is not great about supporting its artists unless you hit really big.
Yeah.
It's that, and are very commercial. So some people are making an absolute killing, but that middle ground is quite shaky.
Well, one consolation for that, and we share this, I guess, me with doing podcasts and teaching and all of that in your craft is, barring major situations, it can be done as an older person. It's not physically as demanding as being an athlete or whatever.
Correct.
Lifting cargo, doing that kind of work. So we can prolong it a little bit if we have to work into our golden years to pay the bills. As long as the mind is sharp, I guess we need that.
That's true. That's very true. And I worked with so many, with actors, it's a bit different. Of course, with dancers, right? I worked with a lot of dancers.
Oh.
So, but they have very much of a ticking time clock. And I've actually felt really fortunate. I'm like, oh, you don't have this, because that for them, that clock is very real. And just as it's for athletes, right? That is a very real thing. But yeah, that's the thing. I don't have to worry about, as long as the mind is sharp, all is good. Yeah, I can keep creating.
That's good. And it sounds like you would want to anyway. Retirement, quote unquote, for a creator is, okay, maybe you take a couple extra vacations or something. But if I hear you right, you're going to be writing on your vacation anyway.
Well, I don't know if I write so much on my vacation now. But yeah, you don't turn that off, and you do get joy. And the great thing about writers, and this also I think would also apply to songwriters. Anybody who and many visual artists is you can the physical demands are not so egregious that you can't keep creating. It's still possible to keep going,
right?
As long as the will and the energy, of course, is not the same. But that's just a fact of life.
Absolutely. Do you find, and we'll kind of wrap it a little bit here, but do you find that when you put pen to paper or you put finger to keyboard, do you find that it's always an enjoyable experience? I know it wasn't on January 1st. We went through that, but like in general, do you find the art of writing and creating as like it fills your cup? Or do you feel sometimes that if it's on, and you mentioned being on commission, I'd love to kind of know what that is real quickly, but like a contracted work you're producing, is that a little different for you, producing out of having to for someone else versus something brand new for yourself?
It can be, yeah, of course, as opposed to writing on spec, which is short for speculation.
Okay.
Like, often with commissions you have deadlines, and sometimes you have certain specific, their specifications. Just like a comparison I can make is like when you're exercising, right? Not every day you do your exercise is fun and joyous. It doesn't always feel good. Yeah. I mean, so, sometimes you're sore. Sometimes you just don't feel like it's as good as it can be. So sometimes the writing is torturous. Sometimes you get to a place and you're like, oh, this is not good, but I don't know how to fix this. So now, of course, it feels great when you do, if and when you do conquer that. I wish I could say every day is a wonderful filling my cup bliss, but I think that would be
it's kind of a pipe dream, I would imagine.
That is the pipe dream. Yeah, I mean, think about like who's the major stars. Do you think they enjoy all this dance, or like Beyonce or Taylor Swift or Madonna? They're not going to love all those dance rehearsals.
No, yeah, because you get to put the work in to get to the show ready. And,
I mean, it's art. We as artists work really hard to make everything look effortless.
and you do a good job. You do. I mean, you're fooling us as a group, as a consumer.
Right.
When I watch you guys, oh my goodness, it's so impressive.
Well, you're trying to make things that like just come out of you, like like manna from heaven, right? So it works really beautiful. And I will also say this: my experience has been the easier that something comes out of me, almost typically the better it is.
Okay.
And that can be sort of torturous in a different way, because if I'm laboring over something, often that's indicative that that's not going to be my best work.
Yeah, that kind of speaks to what you said about just write. Just get it and go for it and see what happens and edit it the next day. Because if you're pondering too long on the one thing, maybe it's going to spiral down.
Right. Yeah. And the thing is also, when you write every day, even if, I have like a minimum of an hour, but if you're starting out, even if you just start 15 minutes, because you ask the people who are wondering how to start this, you can start with 15 minutes, you can start with 20 minutes, and literally set your timer and don't look at anything else.
Yeah, turn off all distractions.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's so hard to do. That's so hard to do. But you also writers have to read.
Because it feeds what's going to come out later. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, you have to read. You don't have to, like, playwrights don't have to replace, although it's really helpful. Mm-hmm. But, Stephen King has some great quote. I can't remember what it is. Basically, there's no point in being a writer if you don't read. And the reading rates have gone down dramatically, especially among young people. And I think about this all the time, because they're not, forget about writing plays and books and whatnot. They're not going to be writing normal sentences. They're not reading.
I see it. I know exactly what you're saying.
I know you do. So, so for artists, like, you have to expose yourself to stuff. But yeah, you have to sit down. So if you're starting out, you have to put all distractions away and just write.
Yeah, that's a really good lesson, and I love it. And I think it's a great place for us to wrap up. I always like to finish with the core best way for someone, whoever's listened to this in its entirety. Thank you so much, by the way, for listening to the podcast.
I was going to say,
because
God bless anyone who's listened.
But it was a great conversation.
To the entirety of this.
We're certainly speaking
Lord have mercy, you have my heart.
We're talking to a niche group here for sure, but there are nuggets of great things in here. In fact, re-listen to it a dozen times, I implore you. But finish us off, Randall, if you don't mind. Like, I know you said that writers can be a little bit reclusive, but I'm sure you would love to have virtual support in any kind of way. tell us where your website is, a little bit about social media for you, and if somebody just absolutely loves plays of any kind and they want to connect directly with you and ask questions or however it works and whatever you're open to,
sure.
let us know.
Yeah, sure. I'm on, well, I have a website, randalldavidcook.com, which is actually undergoing an overhaul, but it's still up right now, a very pathetic version. But there's a way to reach me directly. I get emails directly from them.
Okay,
from
you have
the
a contact
site.
form.
Yeah, that's the terminology. You can see how much I need to work on my website. Yeah, there's a contact form.
Now, you're a creator, and you leave that technical stuff for other people.
Well, no, that actually, this is true. Actually, that's a part of everything. As you get older and you mature, is realize you're not going to be great at everything. Do what you're good at, and try to allocate the rest to other people, because that time can be spent elsewhere and better.
Yeah, Katie and I have learned that over 30 years of marriage. Is she is very much like you, and ideas are just like flowing out, and I'll call it the art is there, and I'm the sous chef. She needs the website done or something technological. That's my mode. So
right,
it's good that you allocate that out to others.
Absolutely, yeah, totally. And actually, my husband is was trained in engineering.
Oh, perfect.
So yeah, he's like that. Yeah, he has a very different brain type than me. So yeah, and actually, it's good. I think it's good for pairs to have this for couples.
Absolutely.
So yes, I'm still on what was formerly known as Twitter, now known as the Horrible X, at Randall D. Cook. I'm not sure how much longer I'm going to be on there. It's Randall D. Cook.
Okay.
I'm on Facebook at Randall David Cook.
Okay.
But I guess probably, yes, any of these ways, I'm not hard to find.
Okay. Do you ever envision jumping on the TikTok, Instagram, those sort of platforms?
I am on Instagram. I forgot. I forget. I'm on Randall David Cook.
Okay.
Yes, the younger people. It's funny. Yeah, some guy in his 20s who's a filmmaker said, "Let's exchange Instas." And I thought, "Oh wow, that's where we are." Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I'm Randall David Cook on Instagram. For a lot of people, younger people, that's probably the easiest place to find me. Actually, I do not do TikTok, and not because I don't like it, but because I'm terrified what a distraction it would be.
Yes. Oh my goodness, it can be a great distraction for me.
Yeah, because I've heard about it. I've seen, I've actually made 2 TikTok videos with my niece, dancing ones. So I've been on there, but I do not. Because I realized, all the cute dogs and cats and dance videos and songs and blah 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 blah.
That the whole day would go away.
Well, yeah. That's it. It's already bad enough.
I think the only salvation on that I've heard is the battery on the phone dies, and then you're like pulled away from this magnet, and you're like, oh. So, and you with your discipline hour plus of writing, I applaud you. Don't do it. Don't go down that rabbit hole and get into TikTok. And this podcast is not sponsored by TikTok.
Right. I hear you. I mean, it's because I have made a purposeful decision not to. Yeah. And mind you, I'm tempted. I'm the kind of person who I'm a Gemini. I'm easily distracted. I love all this stuff. And in fact, it's interesting. I think I am working on a new musical where it'll probably be pop songs, and I think the songwriter wants to. He goes, "Well, we'll start putting them on TikTok when they're ready." I'm like, "Oh my gosh."
My suggestion for that, because we're learning a little bit about social media, we've actually had, I wouldn't call it viral, but we've got 4 cats, and we did a little thing. I don't know if you heard about it, but one of them jumped up on our ping pong table while we were playing and batted the ball back a few times. And this little account that we have, all of a sudden with like 4 or 5 views of whatever video we put about the cats on there, 22,000 in 2 days.
See? So, that's the part
that's why the TikTok is a good for promotion purposes, and
yes,
you won't have to get on there. Just hear the metrics, hear the numbers after your stuff.
Right.
Be fulfilling.
But also, I'd have to create something as entertaining as a cat batting off ping pong balls.
Maybe not. Maybe you have someone else create.
I don't know. That's pretty. That's pretty impressive. See, that's the kind of thing that I would want to see. And I would get in trouble with, right? Because I'm like, oh, look at this. I want to see more cat and doggy stuff.
And
so,
they will show them to you. You will see more than you've ever.
I know. But wow, 22,000. That's impressive.
Yeah, and that's nothing because I told some students today. I'm like, oh my God, they're up to 22,000, and they're like, oh well, we're on TikTok and we've got 4 million. I'm like, what are you talking about? And it's silly. They're running in a parking lot, singing a song and looking at the camera. They don't even know why it has the allure that it does, but there are people out there, consumers of that, of those videos that both you and I are acknowledging would be attractive to watch. But I think in the back of the brain, knowing it's a time suck, that's where we stand apart. So I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of me for not devoting our lives to that.
Well, I mean, because you have a choice, right? We have limited time is a limited resource.
And
where do you want that to go?
Table, right, food on the table,
and that too.
Well, this is
thank you, Jay. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely, been a total pleasure, and it's been a decade since we've had a conversation, and I loved.
I was gonna say it's been a long time since we chatted.
We're not going to mention that, like how
long.
No,
I'm not going to say how long. I did think about that before this chat started. I thought, oh my gosh, wow.
Yeah. Except for that little stint where you did the residency. I call it a residency. I don't know if that was a thing, but up at Furman when you had your play, that would be like maybe a middle point of our long time between.
You're right, like a brief intersection.
But I love this, and it's been fantastic. I love learning all of this, and thank you for sharing your expertise. And
thank you for having me, and thank you for chatting so long.
Absolutely, no, I love doing it. That's why the podcast exists. So, as a bit of trivia before we end, because I haven't asked this question in a long time, and you're in theater, so that you're the perfect person. If you don't know it, no pressure. But Limelight, because the podcast is named after a term that started as a theatrical device. When I say Limelight, what conjures up in your mind?
Yeah, if I know this, Limelight was material that was used around the light to prevent in the early theaters to prevent maybe even fire issues.
You're absolutely right, and it was like the preliminary stage lighting that was dependable, I guess, is we want to say.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, passed the test.
You did. Fantastic. And now you can pass that along to anyone else. They're like, oh yeah, well, or use it. Oh, please use the word somewhere in one of your plays.
It is fascinating how, like, some of these terms that we use now, what the origins are, right? That stuff is fascinating.
Mm-hmm. I love that too. Yeah, I remember taking Old English in college and like, whoa, that word became that word in Middle English, and then became that word in Modern English. What? Fabulous.
Right.
Well, awesome. Well, I do again appreciate the time, and it's been awesome. So look forward to putting this one out to the world, and hopefully we can reconnect another time and we can catch up.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jay. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Have a great evening. You too.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.